Right, did you hear how out it was and then it resolved back in? Okay, so we're going to talk about the minor blues. We're going to use this major triad tension sharp 4 melodic structure, this quadratonic. If you check out the PDF, I went ahead and wrote out C minor blues, 12-bar form minor blues, C minor, F minor, C minor, down to the flat 6 chord, A flat dominant, G dominant, back to C minor. Okay. I also threw in a handful of these major triad tension 4 moments. Okay, we're going to need them in a couple different keys. Gary, what's happening, man? We're going to need them in a few different keys to apply it to this form. And I'm going to go ahead and explain to you kind of the rule of what I'm thinking about in terms of why I put them in the measures I did and on which triads I did. Because for the most part, they are not root structure. There is one that's root structure. I'll show it to you in a second. I'm going to walk you through all of them, and then I'll play it a little so you can hear the example of how this comes across musically. But first, I just want you to understand the function that I'm using each one of these patterns, these quadratonics, for. Yesterday we did some melodic ear training, and I showed you how the major triad, G major triad, tension sharp 4 can work over all 4 of the dominant chords that are related through dominant diminished to G7. So here's G7, right? G7. G7 and a G major triad tension sharp 4 work together. Okay, that shouldn't really be surprising to anyone. It's essentially, you could think of it as G Lydian dominant, maybe it's G half whole diminished. It doesn't really matter what scale we're talking about because we're just using these 4 notes to very specifically imply the sound of a G chord with the sharp 11. Okay, not a flat 5 because the natural 5th is in the triad, so we have the D note, but we're adding the sharp 11. And then we can insert some chromaticism and some leading tones into it. We can use all 12 notes if we want to, but this is a really good, precise starting point for implying a particular sound of G dominant. We can then move that G dominant up to B flat dominant, and the same shape works. G major, tension sharp 4. Okay, we can take B flat and move it up another minor third to D flat. And the G major triad tension sharp 4 still works. Okay, and then finally we can move D flat up to E, E7, and play a G major triad tension sharp 4, and it still works. So we can use them over any 4 of these dominant chords. We can use them over their related diminished chords. We can use it over Lydian dominant. We can use it over just a standard Lydian sound. It works in all of these situations. But arguably my favorite way to use this quadratonic is as a tritone sub. So what I mean by that is that if I'm playing G major triad tension sharp 4, I really like resolving that down a half step to either F sharp major or F sharp minor. Daniel, what's happening, man? Great to see you. So what that means in the context of applying this to, let's say, a minor blues form is that anytime we want to move to a new tonicized chord, like we want to feel like we're resolving to a new area, we can just play this shape a half step above where we're headed for 1, maybe even 2 measures before we get there, and it will set it up. It's almost like preceding it with a tritone substitution, right? So it's very similar to the idea of comping. If you've been through our Chords for Life course, or if you've watched any of our free lessons on how chords move, it's essentially the same idea of comping, where we can put any kind of dominant chord, be it a 5 chord or a tritone sub, before any chord that we want to target. We can do that when we're comping, even if it's not in the real book, even if it's not what other musicians in the group are playing. We can create harmonic tension by placing a dominant chord on the 5th or the tritone sub, right, the flat 2 dominant, preceding a target chord. In this case, we're doing the exact same thing, but with single note ideas. And we're implying it with this quadratonic, this triad plus 1, right? The idea being to try not to treat this as a scale. It is sort of a 4-note scale, but if you checked out yesterday's lesson, I believe that was lesson number 32, we were doing ear training with it. We were trying to hear it as that spooky kind of haunted house Navy SEAL note. Okay? We want to be able to take advantage of that emotion, that feel, that color, very intentionally in a controlled manner, and then be able to resolve the whole thing down a half step. So if you look at the PDF that I wrote up, if you haven't had a chance to download it yet, the link's in the description. You'll see 5 different places I put this quadratonic, I believe. I think 3 of them have an asterisk next to them. Those are the ones that I recommend you try first. Okay, Sean, what's happening, man? Evan, great to see you on here. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well. Start with the 3 versions that have the asterisk. Okay, those are, to me, the more kind of like expected ones. Like those are the places that you would kind of really expect to see these quadratonics at work. And then there's 2 that are a little bit more unexpected that we'll talk about in a minute. Measure 4. Okay, C minor for 4 bars. There's not a lot happening, but most players in the last 1 to 2 measures of that first chunk of C minor, in measures 3 and sometimes 3 and definitely 4, will start to set up a movement to F minor. Okay, because 4 bars is a long time to play over C minor if you're not playing a modal tune. So what we can do is we can essentially imply melodically C minor, G flat dominant, down to F minor. G flat dominant. That's like the tritone sub. Okay, you can think of it as G flat or C7. Either way, as I have it notated, it's a G flat major triad tension sharp 4. Okay, that was the first 8 bars of a minor blues, nice and slow. C minor. Here's bar 4. I'm going to move to G flat, tension sharp 4. And that resolves really beautifully to F minor. Can you hear it? Can you see it? We sit on F minor for 2 bars. Ignore what I have in the second measure, this middle chunk. What is that, bar 6? Don't worry about that just yet. There's no asterisk there, so don't worry about it. We're going to come back and talk about that, and I'm also just going to play through some of these ideas so you can hear them in time. F minor, back to C minor. Okay. I didn't put any quadratonics for any of these other measures. If you're brand new hanging with us, if you don't know much about melodic triads, just play whatever you know over those measures, and then try these quadratonics over the ones that I'm specifically talking about. And if you're not sure how to play these shapes, look up lesson number 32. I think it's the Simpsons thumbnail, and you'll be able to find all these charts, all these shapes charted out. Major, triad, tension, sharp 4. So that's the first 8 bars. And then in measure 9, it's an A flat 7, usually notated as an A flat 7 or an A flat 7 sharp 11. Sometimes we see it as a 2-5, like an E flat minor to A flat 7, but it's basically just a flat 6 dominant. Okay, A flat 7 sharp 11, so we can play A flat major, tension sharp 4. So this is a root structure version of this chord. Root structure meaning that the triad we're using is the same, starts on the same note as the root note of the chord, as opposed to an upper structure triad. That resolves down a half step to G7, right? So this is the same function I'm talking about of inserting a sort of tritone sub movement of a dominant 7 type thing down a half step. But in this case, it's actually in the chord progression of the tune. This is not us superimposing anything or implying anything. It's there. We're just taking advantage of it. That moves down to G7 or G7 flat 9. If you've been hanging with me for a while, I usually just treat this, there's a few different triads we could use, but I usually just do root structure. So G major, tension flat 2 to give us the sound of a flat 9 chord without just arpeggiating a dominant. That brings us back to C minor. And then in the last measure of the form, we want to set up the movement back to the top. So it's a 5 chord. You could play it as a 2-5, you could play it as a 5, whatever you want to do, but I went ahead and notated melodically the D flat tension sharp 4. That gives us that half step movement. If you play D flat major tension sharp 4, it's going to want to resolve down a half step. It works beautifully. To sit and kind of work on each one of these separately, because there's a few of them. There's G flat, there's A flat, and there's D flat. Okay, and they're always a half step above where we want to move to. Wherever we're headed, we go up a half step and we play that major triad with a tension sharp 4, and it gives us the sound that I'm talking about. Let me go ahead and really slowly loop the minor blues, and I'm just going to improvise over it at a very slow tempo so you can hear these sort of outlines, because I'm not going to play them with the chords, but this way you can hear what it sounds like, and then we'll talk about the other, I think there's 2 more areas where I threw it into the PDF that we could use this. What's up, Andrew? Good to see you, man. My lines simple. Right? Did you hear how out it was and then it resolved back in? Here's G flat, back to C minor, A flat, 1 or 2 or 3 notes from a particular quadratonic. I'm not trying to arpeggiate them, I'm trying to imply them. Right, that was 2 notes. Just 3 notes. That was 2 notes. Now, there was 2 other measures where I threw this stuff in. Miles, glad you did get Andrew, great to see you, man. There's 2 other measures where I threw it in if you're looking at the PDF, and that's in measure 2 and measure 6. Okay? Measure 2 is kind of just like a let's break apart the first 4 measures area. Right? We see this in standard blues. We're on the 1 chord, we move to the 4 chord, we go back to the 1 chord. Or sometimes if you look at like old school blues, Charlie Parker did this, 1 chord, 2-5 back to the 1. It's not always the 4 chord. There's other areas we can move to. What I did with this quadratonic, just thinking functionally, is I know that this quadratonic wants to resolve down a half step. So I started on C minor, and then I wrote in, there's no asterisk, so this is a secondary version of it, but it's still worth checking out, is we can just go up a half step to D flat, play major, D flat major, tension sharp 4. And then resolve back to C minor. And then that brings us, measures 1, 2, and 3, that brings us to measure 4 where we have the G flat major, tension sharp 4. Which resolves us to F minor. So now we have a new sort of chord or a new key, a new melodic structure on every measure of the first 4 bars. C minor, D flat major, C minor, G flat major, F minor. So that's a lot of melodic movement to help break apart the monotony of just hearing C minor over and 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 over. And then I took it one step farther, which is once we get to F minor in bar 5, we have 2 bars there. Why not use the second measure, the second bar of F minor, to set up a resolution back to the C minor in measure 7? How can we do that? D flat major, tension sharp 4, because that's a half step above C minor. So I can go right from the F minor sound for 1 measure to a D flat major, tension sharp 4 for a measure, back to C minor. So now almost the whole first 8 bars, 7 measures, we have a new sound on every measure, as opposed to just 1 chord. 4 chord, 1 chord. Right now we have chord, 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 chord. Here's the top. all C minor. Do you hear how sort of static it felt? That's the gist of it. Take it slow. Make sure you know your basic shapes. You got to know those triads. This won't work if you don't know your triads really well. Once you know your basic major triads, then make sure you know them with the sharp 4 added. There's only, let's see, D flat, G flat, A flat. There's only 3 major triads that I'm inserting here. And one of them is a root structure triad, like the A flat dominant in measure 9. We're just playing an A flat major triad. So that one should be relatively easy-ish, but you still have to know the shape. But the other ones are upper structure triads where we're implying the sound of a particular chord that isn't there. You could actually even argue that it kind of might be a root structure triad, like if we're playing C minor up to D flat 7 back down to C minor. I tend to think of this as G7 with a D flat triad sitting up on top of it melodically. But either way, most of these are relatively basic. They're always a half step above an important moment, right? We're trying to get to a place, so we're going up a half step and then we're coming back down. But it's not just a parallel half step. We're not playing C minor, C sharp minor. We're switching to the major triad, tension sharp 4, to imply this sound of like a Lydian dominant kind of a thing, okay? I think that's where I'm going to leave it today. Tomorrow we'll talk about some chord movement. Friday's our Advanced Melodic Triads Concepts Day. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. Let me know so I can try and help. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Happy practicing. Hey YouTube, it's Jordan Clemens with NYC Jazz Guitar Master Classes and the Melodic Triads Study Group. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a ton of content coming out on YouTube this year. We've been doing daily jazz guitar lessons, so I'm going to be posting videos like this pretty much every day. So if you dug this and you want to follow me, subscribe and make sure that you turn on notifications so that you can watch more videos like this. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you in the comment section. Hope to see you in the next video.